Okay, so we are, this is the third class now in our beautiful Kabbalah of the Alphabet series. I'm going to share my screen with you right now. And without getting into too much of a recap, because we're doing so much each week, it would be hard to fully recap. But we're seeing how the Hebrew alphabet tells us a story, a Kabbalistic story, that is something that's even deeper, that's something that's beyond words. That's something that there are no words that can communicate this message, this story directly, because it's too deep. There are stories in the Torah that might hint to it, that might allude to it, but there is no story that really tells it to us as organized, as organized, even though hidden way, as the Hebrew alphabet. And as we saw in the alphabet, we have over here, what we said already in the first class, is that we have the Aleph, which is symbolic of what's called in Kabbalah the Or Ein Sof. Two different phrases that both begin with an Aleph. The Or, which means the light of the Ein Sof, of the ineffable God, right? The light of oneness. The light of oneness that is too bright for us as human beings to fully comprehend. And if we were too close to that light, it would be like getting too close to the sun. It would fry, we'd be completely fried. But even more than our existence not being, even a bigger problem than us not being able to exist is the problem of us not having free will, which is the goal of God's creation. Right? If I sit there with a gun to your head and I say, and I say, do what I tell you, you don't have free will because I'm forcing you to do this. So therefore, if the light of God is so strong, it's not the intimidation factor, it's the fact that we would all be too angelic to ever have free will, and therefore we can never fully actualize our potential as godly beings, because a godly being goes through a process of free will, which is only possible if God distances us from the Or Ein Sof and creates a filter, which is represented by the Beis and the Gimel and the Dalid, which actually spells the word beged, garment. God creates a garment, a filter between the Or Ein Sof, between the ineffable light of God, so that we can stand really 4 steps removed from God on a physical plane that is represented by this letter, the letter Dalet. The letter Dalet, which is numerical value 4, like the 4 corners of the earth, north, south, east, and west. The Dalet itself, which is both a vertical and horizontal line that sort of seems to be pointing in all of these different directions. The word Dalet, which is Delet, which is a doorway into the great, it's a doorway that sort of separates it, a doorway of, it's both a separation, but it also allows entry. So this world is a doorway that separates us from God, but also allows us to come closer. So the physical world is considered a Dalid. We learned last week this piece of Talmud that says that the letters Yud, and this is what I'm quoting on the bottom of my screen over here, the letters Yud and Hey that constitute the word Yah, Yud and Hey, the name of Hashem, are referring to the 2 worlds that God created, one with the letter Hey and the other with the letter Yud. And the Talmud goes on to say that our world is compared to the letter Hey, the 5th letter of the alphabet. And the next world, the spiritual world, the world of souls, is compared to the letter Yud, which we're going to get to today. Hopefully, we're going to make the transition from Hey, from this world, to Yud, to the spiritual world. And that's our goal for today's class. But what we showed is that if you take a look at the letter Hey, what is the letter Hey? It is a Dalid, which is the physical world. And stuck in over here, it's a Yud. And I just want to show you over here, maybe you'll see it better. Natalie, if you can take a look just over here, on this little board over here. Natalie says she's not, I don't know if she's on the call now, but she sent me that her son bought a beautiful piece of Kabbalistic art in Tzvat, which focused on the Hey. But either way, it looks something like this, but it's a beautiful letter. But if you take a look the way it is written over here, because this is the way it's written in the Torah, looking more like this, but you can see it very strongly. This is the Dalid, numerical value 4. This is the Yud, which represents that point, that spark of godliness. It's just a little dot, the Yud, just the smallest little, it's the cutest letter in the whole alphabet. It's just a little dot, because it represents that hidden point, that hidden spark of godliness. So this world is compared to a hay because it has the Dalid, it's the physical plane with a little Yud in it, a little hidden spark of godliness hidden everywhere. In every place that you look in the physical world, we're always trying to access that spark of godliness. Every time we meet somebody else, they can be like, the Dalid represents the 4 sons of the Pesach Seder. Whether you meet somebody who's wise, whether you meet someone who you feel is evil, whether you meet someone that you feel is okay, there's not, they're just a tom, they're just simple. Whether you meet someone who's clueless. And by the way, the 4 children of the Pesach Seder doesn't mean 4 children, it means 4 bazillion, right? Whatever it is, it means all sorts of people. You have to look past the Dalid and look into the Yud, because the Yud is just a point. And that very same spark that's inside of you, that spark is inside of them. And when you're eating food, so if you spend your whole life eating food just because you like the taste of it, just because you like the way it feels to eat, so then you're only connecting to the Dalidness of the world. But if every single time you eat, you make it a mindful act, and you say, I'm eating to get closer to God, and because of that, the food that I'm eating is the food that God has allowed me to eat. And the way that I'm eating is in a way that's going to connect me deep. I'm going to connect to that, and I'm accessing the Yudness. I'm accessing the Pintel Yid, the spark of godliness that's inside of that thing. And every single thing that I do, if I go on vacation, if I'm only doing it, just to fulfill my own, to have fun, to have a party, then that's just the Dalid. But if I try to look at God and the beauty of nature, then I'm connecting to the Yud within that Dalid. I'm always trying to access the Yudness. I'm always trying to access the spirituality that's hidden inside of it. Once we see that, now we move on to the next letter, which is the letter Vav. And if you take a close look at the letter Vav, what do you see? What's the first thing that you notice about the letter Vav? Look at it compared to the Yud.
The Yud is in the Vav.
Exactly. Well, the Yud, the truth is you'll find the Yud in many, many different letters, but the Vav itself really just seems like an extended Yud. So this Yud, which was hidden in the Hey, it was hidden in that, it was enclosed. You didn't see it that much. It's hidden. The letter Hey stands for the word harayon, pregnancy, right? The Hey seems to represent how spirituality is hidden. The world is pregnant with spirituality, but it needs to be actualized. When you look at the letter Vav, Vav is the Yud, but brought down. It's like it's being manifested in creation. And if you take a look at all of the different aspects of the Vav, let's go over here, and if you have your own, you can look at it. Otherwise, just keep on looking at my screen. But over here, if you take a look at the letter Vav, so the first thing is the Vav itself. Even before we look at anything over here, the Vav plays a very important role in Hebrew grammar. When you add a Vav to a word, the Vav means and. And. That is what the prefix Vav means. So therefore, you connect 2 words by adding a Vav in between. If I want to say, in Hebrew, I want to say Andy and John. So I would say, so that's 3 words in English. In Hebrew, it's Andy v'John. Okay, so it brings those 2 things together. Eshumayim is with a Vav, right? As fire and water. So Vav is connection. Because what is the Vav doing? The Vav is playing that role, right, again, in our story of spiritual awakening. The Vav itself symbolizes the fact that once you understand the Hey, once you understand that there is spirituality in everything, then we're spending our entire life trying to bring it out, trying to connect this physical world, represented by a hey, the spiritual world, represented by the yud. And the vav is bringing that out. The vav is connecting, it's bridging the gap between these two worlds. The word vav, the actual word vav itself means a hook. And if you look at the shape of it, it actually looks kind of like a hook. It's hooking something, because a hook is connection, hooking two things together. The vav itself is numerical value 6. If you take a look at this image, I'm sorry, wrong slide. If you take a look at this image over here, so you see that any three-dimensional physical shape, how many sides does it have? 6 sides, right? So that means that the number 6 represents the different sides, so to speak, of this three-dimensional world. What does that mean, Kabbalistically? That means that all of our work, all of our aim, our whole goal in this physical realm is we're always building. We're building this cube. We're building this three-dimensional object. We're building this physical world. And it's specifically by going into the world, not like other religions say that you need to remove yourself from the world in order to access spirituality. The Vav teaches us that as we build the 6 sides of the world, as we build this three-dimensional world, the building itself gives us an opportunity to emulate God, and by emulating God, to bring more godliness into the world. So therefore, when I go out into the workforce, when I go out into the workplace and I say, I'm going to do my job to create, to build, to do something, to make and I'm thinking I'm trying to emulate God by making the world a better place, that's the lesson of the Vav. I'm bringing more godliness into the world through my physical activity, represented by the Vav, the number 6, which is the 6 sides of creation. So Vav is that. Vav is with its shape, with its meaning, with its numerical value, shows that throughout my life, throughout the building of the physical world, I'm trying to bring down the yud. I'm trying to bring down the godliness. Now listen to this. When I do that, that's not the end of my spiritual service. Because as those who are on our call on Monday night about Shabbat, and so happy that how things fall out, that we're about to have the discussion that we're about to have on the week where we've been pushing Shabbat and the Shabbos project. And again, if you weren't on the call, I'm happy to share with you the recording. It's available on YouTube, on our YouTube page, or if you want to listen to it on the go, it's available on our podcast. But you can listen to it, and please do this Shabbos Shabbat project, a great week to do something a little bit more for Shabbos. But our role in this world is to be 2 things, is to be builders, but also to be able to stand back and believe that God is running the show. So it's a great week this week to have the Shabbat project because when there's things like the elections, we get into this trap that makes us just freak out and think that this world is being run by politicians, being run by electoral colleges, being run by the media, and the truth is it's not. It's not. I mean, obviously we give a certain amount of God created the world in a certain, with using the mechanisms that we do have free will, and therefore we choose leaders, but it's still God's show. These people, they're all puppets. They're all really puppets of God. And yes, do they make a difference here? Do they make a difference there? Absolutely they do, but nothing is outside of God's plan. Just like in our own work. So if I work harder, I'll make a little bit more money. If I work less, I'll make a little bit less money. But at the end of the day, it's really God's hand. It's really God's hand doing it. And, we never know. We never know because, we know that you go into your car one day and it's you turn it on, and instead of being the nice smooth sound, it's and you're like, oh gosh, do I have to replace that? And boom, right? That's one thing on your or something goes wrong in your basement. Your basement floods or something, and that's like, oh my gosh, I need this another $5,000 to replace that, right? Or whatever it is, right? We know money comes, money goes, money's here, money's there. The stock market, one day's up, one day's down, right? So we never really know. We never fully know how much, as much as we want to say, it's I'm doing this, I'm making more money because I'm doing this, right? But we never really know. One thing that we do know is that God is there. Can't see God, but God is there, and God is deciding, okay, you yes and you not. And your investment is going to go up, and your investment is not. And you're going to pull out of this investment, and then it's going to shoot up. You're going to pull out of this, or you're going to get in here, and it's going to go down. Right? So much is out of our control. So we can't get lost in the world of the Vav. And that's why after we've mastered the Vav, we're also asked to master the world of the Zayin. Zayin is numerical value 7. If the Vav, which is 6, represents the 6 days of the week, where we're building the 6 sides of the 3-dimensional world, you heard what I did there? 6 days of the week, we're building the 6 sides of the 3-dimensional world. That's our effort. The Zayin is that 7th point. It's the point, it's the space that fills it. On Shabbat, the 7th day of the week, we say, Vayichulu Hashamayim. God completed the world, and God gave it Vashavas Vayinafash. God gave it its soul. The Zayin, the 7th point is what brings it all together, is the space that's within the 6 sides. It's the soul of the world. If you take a look at the shape of the Zayin, numerical value 7 represents Shabbat. Look at these two together. Look at the Vav and the Zayin. Almost identical, right? Except which one would you say is a little bit more of a majestic letter?
Zion.
Now look at the Zayin, right? Look at it, it's beautiful. It's got a crown. It's got a wide top. It's like the Vav wearing a shtreimel. Right? The shtreimel's like what the Hasidim wear on Shabbat, right? That long wide head. It's literally the Vav with the crown. For 6 days of the week, that's the Vav, you're going to work hard. You're going to work. You're going to build. You're building God's world. Zayin, on the 7th day of the week, take a step back from the world and you say, okay, just as I had an obligation to build God's world for 6 days, on Shabbat, God says, today, I don't want you to build my world. Don't work. You have no obligation. You're trying to make money. I get it. But I'm in control. Rest on the 7th day and I will take care of you. Shabbat is the matana. It's God's gift to us. Right? If you just go about Shabbat like it's every single other day, then really what you're showing is you've taken control. All right, you on control, God says. You don't want to know how the picture looks without me in that picture. That's not what we want. We don't want to be in this world and just be subject to the natural order of things. The natural order of things stink. It's chaotic, it's tohu, it's a disaster. Zayin is when we say, I'm taking a completely different attitude. For 6 days, I worked my tush off. And now Zayin, I'm realizing that this is not my world. This is God's world. Today, we are all kings and queens, and we're accepting God. That's the beautiful Zayin, number 7. The word for Zayin, we'll take a look back at this slide over here. The word for Zayin, and I'm going to focus over here on this one, on this definition, even though they all fit in. But this one is to nourish and to sustain. On the 7th day of the week, we realize that it's not the 6 days of hard work that is giving me my sustenance. It's the 6 days of the hard work and then my pulling back from that. It's God who comes in and says it's God that gives the sustenance. So that's what the Zayin represents. Okay. I think that's enough to say, again, there's more here that you could look at when you look at the slide, and you can, try to see how to put everything else in. But those are the main points, focusing on the relationship between the Vav and the Zayin.
Question.
Yes.
Are we the only language that has letters, each letter identifying a word or a meaning? Or like the Chinese, I feel like the Asians have that also, right?
I don't know. I'm not sure. That's a good question. It's good to know. I mean, alpha, beta, do those words mean anything? It's possible that they do. We call somebody an alpha male. I don't know if it's in the definition.
Yeah, but I mean, it comes from the word aleph, that means strong and leader.
Yeah. I'm sure that it's connected to that. I mean, any language that originates in Hebrew will have some aspect of that there. Are there other languages that have original innovations within the letters? I'm not sure. That's a good question.
Latin uses the roots of words that mean something.
Right, but again, Latin, which our alphabet does come from Latin, but again, you see that it's clearly deriving itself from Lashon Kodesh, from Hebrew. You see it. I mean, it almost lines up. And again, like we showed the first time, there are a couple of different places where it seems to go in a different direction, but so many different places within, you see how it mirrors it and how it's originally derived from Hebrew. Okay, by the way, just one more thing, just with, I don't want to forget this, and that is that when you just think about the number 7, and there is no real reason, it's not like the month or the year, which have scientific explanations as to why a month is the amount of time that it is, why a year is the time that it is. There's no scientific explanation why a week should be 7 days. The only explanation that exists, to the best of my knowledge, and I could be wrong, you can find out, but the only explanation is because the Torah, the Bible says a week is 7 days, because God created the world in 6 days, whatever that means, and rested on the 7th. I don't believe that there is any other explanation to that, which is one of the wonderful testimonials to the authenticity of the Torah, especially when you look around and you see how the completion of the natural order seems to revolve around the number 7, with the 7 colors in the rainbow, with the 7 notes in the musical scale, with the 7 different continents, with the fact that the human body, which has a head and then 2 arms and a torso, 2 legs and a sexual organ, seems to be built out of 7 different building blocks. The face itself divides itself into 2 ears, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and a mouth also breaks itself down into 7. So you see 7 happening on so many different levels, and all of it sort of weaves together as being this. It shows this map, this blueprint, this divine plan of creating a pattern within creation that we can look and we can identify and we can say, here's the hand of God. So how appropriate is it that Shabbat, which is the 7th day, we sit back with our crowns on our heads, which represents, like we spoke about in the class on Monday night. And again, Bob, I don't know, I think you might have came on after I said this, but if you want to access that class, I can send it to you. It's on YouTube. But
I was on. I saw it. Yeah.
You saw that again.
Yeah.
So we get that extra crown, we get that extra soul, which is represented by the crown. So the Zion represents that. The Zion represents that completion, that crown, right? The little, right? When we in English we say, all right, I have to dot the I, right? In Hebrew you might say, I have to put the crown on the Zion. Actually, you wouldn't say that, because in Hebrew they've now turned Zion, because Zion also means a weapon. In Hebrew, they've turned the word Zion. It also has not as clean of a symbolism. So I wouldn't say put the crown on the Zion if you're speaking to somebody in Hebrew who knows Hebrew slang. But at least in theory, we can talk about this idea that you're putting the crown on. The number 7 represents that. It represents kingship, represents Malchus, because it is the perfection of the physical world. So now we're climbing the ladder. We're climbing the ladder here from the Hey to the Yud. And what we've now seen is that that on the level of Hey, the Yud is still hidden within the Daled. Right? The godliness is still hidden. The Vav, through the 6 days of the week, through our physical activity, we are now creating a bridge. We're bringing out the spirituality within creation. That's one mode of operation, to build like the Vav. On Shabbat, which is represented by the Zion, that is where we take a step back and we allow ourselves to realize that the physical world itself is being run by God. Once we are now at that step, we're ready for the next breakthrough. What is the next breakthrough? That happens on the level of the ches, which is the chet, which is the next one. This is, by the way, one of the hardest ones that people that don't grow up learning Hebrew, they have trouble pronouncing it, but it's a ch sound, ches. And I want you to take a look here at the shape of the chet, the way it's written in the Torah. What do you see? What might you notice about the ches, the way it's written in the Torah, in terms of its shape and how it relates to the previous letters? So if you look closely, it seems to be a combination of the Vav together with the Zion and a little bridge connecting the two. The bridge like a little arrow pointing upwards, connecting the Vav and the Zion. And here, the Hebrew alphabet tells us yet another, or continues with the next chapter of this fascinating story, because it tells us now the next level of our growth. Okay, you've mastered the Vav. That means as you go through the 6 days of the week, you're looking, how can I bring more God into the world? I'm building God's world. I'm a messenger of God. I'm emulating God. That's the Vav. On Shabbat is the Zion, and you say, I'm taking a step back, and God, I believe this is your world. You bring completion to the world. But you know what? We're not beings of this world. You've reached mastery in this world, but you know what? We're not here just to experience godliness in this world. We're here to break through it. We're here to discover the spiritual dimension while we're here. We're here to become, to connect, to relate, to get to know our souls and say, one second, I'm bigger than this world. So once we master the Vav, the Zion, once we bring those two together, we add something else to those two. We add a little bridge, and that bridge points upwards. And we say, once I've mastered the natural world, I'm ready to go supernatural. Once I've mastered the physical world, I'm ready to become metaphysical. And the letter Ches is that number that breaks through the natural world. The number, the Ches is the letter that represents what's miraculous, what's metaphysical. If we take a look, the letter Ches, which has numerical value 8. What do we know about 8? It's coming up in 5 weeks from now. We know that Hanukkah. Right? Hanukkah is 8 days. And Hanukkah is the holiday of miracles. Because the number 8 represents, if 7 represents the natural order, then 8 represents transcending the natural order. If the letter Zion, which is 7, and the 7 days of the week represent completion in the natural order, then the 8th day is the 8th day that doesn't exist. There is no 8th day, because after Shabbat comes Sunday. But that 8th day is the day that we experience not within time, but above time. On the 8th day of a child's life, of a baby boy's life, he gets a bris milah, a circumcision. And the circumcision is saying that the organ that represents growth within the natural world, because it's the sexual organ of creation and of procreation and of desire, we put that stamp of spirituality on it and say, you can rise above. You can rise above the physical world. You can rise above your natural Freudian desires. I think Freud was one that made us believe that we are a slave to our sexual desires, and in many ways he might be right. But from a purely spiritual Torah point of view, we are able to rise above that. By doing the things, by living a spiritual life, we can break that trend. And we can rise above. That's what's represented by circumcision on the 8th day. And then we get into the translation of the word ches, which is ches yud taf. That's how you would spell it. Which, if you change the vowelization, you get chius. Chius means a life force, living being. You truly live on the level of ches. Because ches is when is when I realize that there is so much more to life than just my physical existence. Sometimes you read these stories of people that went on these spiritual journeys to try to discover their soul, and then finally they find it. And you don't have to read the stories. The truth is that probably everybody on this call has experienced that at one point in time, where you're in a situation. Maybe it's by the kotel, maybe it's doing whatever you're doing to get you into your spiritual high. And then you just suddenly look at the world and you're like, I am so much bigger than this. We are so much bigger than this. That's the ches. That's the chios. That's true life. Like, this is not life. Life is so much bigger. That's what's represented by the ches. Ches is the first letter in the word chayim, which means life. It also stands for the word chuppah, the wedding canopy, and it actually looks like a chuppah if you look at it. Because it's saying that over here, this is when we turn the world, when we realize the chuppah is something that's big, that surrounds us. Right? It's meant to shield, to encompass the space that's inside of it. We realize that this physical world there's a chuppah around it. There's a spiritual aura around it that we're trying to tap into. That's represented by the ches. Okay, so now we're getting closer and closer to Yud. We're getting closer to really just uncovering that point of spirituality. We have the Hey. Let's go back over here. Let's just keep tabs on our journey. We have the Hey, which is the physical world, but it's a Daled with God concealed in it. The Vav is the 6 days of the week that helps us bring that out. The Zion is the 7th day of the week when we stop and we realize, we put our crown on our head and we realize that it's really God bringing perfection to this world. The Ches is that next step when we break through the natural world and now we're connected to spirituality. And now there's one last step before we get to the Yud, before we get to that holy destination of the Yud that we're trying to get to. And that is the Tes, the Tet. Sounds like a T. The Tet is one of the very complicated and mysterious letters. Let's take a look for a moment at the shape of the Tes. What do you see when you see the Tes, besides the fact that it's kind of a funny looking letter? But what do you see anything? Just observe it.
Maybe a Zion, and then the very small opening to the top.
Yeah. So we definitely see a Zion on the left side,
Mm-hmm.
and then on the right side we kind of see a very funny shape.
So maybe like look inward, look internally in our soul.
The one thing is, it seems to be telling you, look in.
Mm-hmm.
Look in. Now, if we would think about physical objects that look like the Tes. So the Sifrei Kabbalah, the Kabbalah works, they see two different images in the Tes. They see, number one, they see three things. They see, like what Andy just said, is pointing inwards. They see a basket, which works well with what Andy says. It's a basket, but yet there's something telling you to look inside. But they see something else also. That is, they see, you might not see it that well over here, maybe you'll see with other versions, but they see a snake whose head is sort of coiling inwards. This would be the head of the snake and sort of extending and having its tail upwards. Now, this is very unusual and very mysterious, that the Tes should look like a snake. The snake, as we know, Kabbalistically, is a symbol for the Yetzer Hara. It's a symbol for evil. The evil inclination is the snake, as in the serpent in the Garden of Eden, who got Adam and Eve to eat from the tree. Now, the letter Tes stands. The first time we see the letter Tes, and by the way, the letter Tes is one of the letters that's used the least, at least in the story of creation, possibly in the whole Torah, I don't remember. But the letter Tes is first presented to us in the Torah at the end of each day, where it says God looked. At the end of each day, it says God looked at what he created that day. So God looked at it, and he saw that it was, what is the next Hebrew word?
Good.
Good, which is, what is the Hebrew word for good? Tov,
Tov.
the
Tov.
Tes. So, and the first several times that Tes appears in the Torah, it's for Tov. So Tes is synonymous with Tov, with goodness. Well, that makes sense why it would be here. But why would the Tes look like a snake? Why would it look like something bad? Now, some of the commentaries point out something interesting, that we have there's a calendar date on the calendar called Tisha B'Av, right? It's the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. Tisha, which is the 9th, or Tes, the 9th, because numerical value 9. Be'av is of the month of Av, but the month of Av is spelled Aleph Beis, right? So Tisha B'Av could be the 9th of the month of Av, but it could also be the 9th Be'aleph Beis, of the Aleph Beis, the 9th letter of the Aleph Beis. Now, Tisha B'Av is a very sad day. It represents our sins, the things that we do wrong, and because of that, we lost the temple. So we're seeing something very interesting with the Tes. We're seeing on the one hand that it stands for Tov. It stands for goodness. It's the basket that contains. It's got the Zion in there. It seems to be good. But on the other hand, we have this idea of, it looks like a snake. It's Tisha B'Av. It represents the saddest day of the calendar. How can it have these dual meanings? How could it have these dual meanings?
Is that part of that freedom of choice that you were talking about before?
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're going to talk about, you're on the right path. We're going to talk about something even more than freedom of choice. But you're getting there. You're getting there. If you take a look at the significant words, we have tov, good. Well, that's a good one. Tahor, purity. Tuma, impurity. The same letter. Tar, taming, pure and impure. So what's going on? The commentaries say the following. Tes, which has the numerical value of 9. So if you think of 9, what like the Pesach Seder, actually, when it goes to who knows 1, who knows 2, who knows 3, who knows 4. When we say who knows 9, what do we say? 9 is the months of pregnancy. Now, what does pregnancy represent? Pregnancy represents the fact that something amazing is happening inside of her, inside of the mother. And when it comes to that 9th month, the 9th month is a very frightening month. Because on the one hand, we are so close to a breakthrough. We're so close to bringing new life into this world. However, it's also traumatic. When the mother goes through a certain aspect of danger and a certain aspect of trauma. And at the moment that a child is born, in a sense, there's a breaking open of the womb. The woman says, oh, my water broke, right? There's a breakage that happens. And it's painful. But that pain, the pain that's happening, is a pain that ushers in new life. The Torah on every single day says, first day, it was good. Second day, well, it doesn't say it on the second day, but it says it twice. On the third day, it was good. Fourth day, good. Fifth day, good. Sixth day, very good.
Very good.
Very good. Now we think, okay, well, that's great that it says very good. Yeah, it was a very good day. It was an excellent day because God completed creation. Yeah, but then we continue reading. What happened on that 6th day of creation? Adam and Eve took the suggestion of the serpent, of the evil inclination, and they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. How in the world could that be a very good day? That is the worst day. They totally failed. And that day was very, very good. Commentaries on the Torah say it was very good because, and this is what you were saying, because until Adam and Eve fell, until they became beings of free will, they weren't very good. Good, when we say good in the Torah, good doesn't just mean, hey, that's really good, it feels good. Doesn't mean it feels good. Good from the Torah's perspective means when something is whole. And like we said again and again in every single one of these classes, wholeness is only when you become somebody that can navigate through the good, through the bad, through the good and through the evil, through the free will, through all of the things that life throws at us. So now when we come to the test, when we're trying to understand what the test represents, the test is the most hidden letter because the test represents the fact that we are so close to the yud. We're so close to getting to that spiritual place. But if you think it's going to be easy, you know, my kids always know when we're playing Stratego. How do you know in Stratego when you're near the other person's flag? It's always surrounded by a bunch of bombs, right? So there's always the most bloodshed in the game of Stratego right when you're about to get there. And in life also, when you're about to have that spiritual baby, when you're about to have that breakthrough, there's going to be contractions. It is impossible to move from one place spiritually to the next level spiritually unless you have those spiritual contractions. What's called in Svarim as Yerida L'Tzorech Aliyah. Unless you go down, you cannot possibly go up. And the challenges always come when you're on the breakthrough to the next level. So therefore, the letter Tes, which comes right before Yud, it's the last letter in the singular letters, which means at Yud, when we get to Yud, we're going to get now to plurality. We're going to get to a place where now all of the individual parts, all the fragmented parts are going to come together in holiness. But when you're about to make that transition, when you're about to access, to fully experience the Yud, not hidden like it is in the Hay, but wide open over there, just the Yud, pure spirituality, what we're all striving for, you're going to have to go through a test. You're going to have to go through a Tisha B'Av, a day of pain. You're going to have to go through the serpent. You're going to have to go through the Tumah. You're going to have to go through these challenges that are represented by the letter Tes. And once we overcome that, now we get to this destination. Now we get to the letter Yud. And the letter Yud itself, the meaning of Yud is a hand. It's the hand that God's hand that gives it to us. And because of that, since Yud is pure holiness, that's why you find Yud you find the numerical value 10 so many times in the Torah. God brought the world into being with 10 utterances. 10 tests, 10 plagues, 10 commandments. Because all of this is God's revelation now into the world. The world is now coming, it's reaching its purpose, which is to access that Yud, to access that holiness. God's name begins with the letter Yud. It's a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. So it is the culmination of that process of this. It's the revelation of the Yud. And by the way, I just want to show you, going back over here, I don't know how well you'll see it in this. Maybe I should have, oh yeah, you'll see it just fine here actually. If you take a look, let's look all the way back to the beginning of the journey. Let's take a close look at the letter Aleph as best as you can see it in this font over here. But if you take a look at the Aleph itself, you see right up here, this little point here? Commentaries say that's a Yud. You see this over here? Again, you can't see it that well in this font because it makes it a little bit long here. But Kabbalists say that's also a Yud. This line over here is a Vav. The Aleph is a composite of a Yud at the top, representing the Yud in the upper worlds, a Yud at the bottom, and the Vav of connection. Because before we start on our journey, we have to realize that the goal of this world, God always exists up in the spiritual realms. Our goal is to bring him down into the lower realms. That's why there's a Yud over here. To bring this Vav to connect the upper Yud and the lower Yud. And this whole journey that we went is just to reveal that Yudness. So we see over here that the first 10 letters of the alphabet are all really showing this journey of the Yud, this journey of this pure spiritual point that has to, this Or Ein Sof, this light that has to descend into the world through the beged, through the garment, and slowly but surely be brought out. And once we have that, once we've discovered the Yud, once we understand the overall purpose of the journey, now we can go into its different parts, the different aspects that we'll experience on this journey, and that we'll see in the other letters of the alphabet. But at least the first 10 letters of the alphabet are giving us this overview of the journey of spirituality, the hidden spiritualness that's going through, that's pulsating through the world, that we're trying to uncover and that we're trying to access. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.